Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We're going to go live to Washington now. President Donald Trump is speaking. The White House has taken a step this evening to restrict Chinese investment and put tariffs on $50 billion in Chinese imports for stealing technology. Let's listen in.
We're going to be doing a Section 301 trade action. It could be about $60 billion, but that's really just a fraction of what we're talking about. I've been speaking with the highest Chinese representatives, including the president, and I've asked them to reduce the trade deficit immediately by $100 billion. It's a lot. So that would be anywhere from 25%, depending on the way you figure, to maybe something even more than that. But we have to do that. The word that I want to use is reciprocal. When they charge 25% for a car to go in, and we charge 2% for their car to come into the United States, that's not good. That's how China rebuilt itself. The tremendous money that we've paid since the founding of the World Trade Organization, which has actually been a disaster for us. It's been very unfair to us. The arbitrations are very unfair. The judging's been very unfair. And knowingly, we always have a minority, and it's not fair. So we're talking to World Trade, we're talking to NAFTA, we're talking to China, we're talking to European Union. And I will say every single one of them wants to negotiate. And I believe that in many cases, maybe all cases, we'll end up negotiating a deal. So we've spoken to China, and we're in the midst of a very large negotiation. We'll see where it takes us. But in the meantime, we're sending a Section 301 action. I'll be signing it right here, right now. I'd like to ask Bob Lighthizer to say a few words about the 301 and where we are in that negotiation. And we're doing things for this country that should have been done.
Donald Trump there in Washington talking of his plans to reduce the trade deficit and to impose tariffs of $60 billion US dollars, I believe he said, onto Chinese imports. He said China charges 25% for a car to go in. We charge 2%. It is unfair. It has been unfair to us. So Donald Trump there on his latest trade tariff measures. Donald Trump has initiated a trade action against China, saying the US deficit with Beijing is out of control. The president says he will impose tariffs of at least $50 billion in Chinese imports in retaliation to what he calls American intellectual property theft. Mr. Trump says the action comes after years of failed talks about the issue.
We have one particular problem, and I view them as a friend. I have tremendous respect for President Xi. We have a great relationship. They're helping us a lot in North Korea, and that's China. The word is reciprocal. That's the word I want everyone to remember. We want reciprocal, mirror. Some people call it a mirror tariff or a mirror tax. Just use the word reciprocal. If they charge us, we charge them the same thing. That's the way it's got to be.
Well, joining me now is Associate Editor at The Hill, Niall Stanage. Hello to you, Niall Stanage. Donald Trump there setting out his plans for tough tariffs against China, and yet at the same time he's saying China is a friend. How's this going to go down?
Well, I think it's going to go down clearly quite badly with the Chinese, but that isn't the audience to which President Trump is playing. He wants this to bolster his popularity with the people who elected him in the first place. Those people have favoured a protectionist kind of programme. That is one of the things on which he was elected. So I think that's where he is playing to, but that doesn't negate the fact that this could lead and will lead to increasing tensions with China.
Yeah, I mean, he was making that point repeatedly there, that this was about reciprocal trade arrangements, that the US is charged $25 for a car to go into China. It's $2 on the way back into the United States, a Chinese car. That's going to play well, isn't it, with his voters? And this is something that he had pledged to do.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely right, Sarah. I mean, Donald Trump was elected in large part because of the voters in industrial states here, states like Pennsylvania and Michigan. He already recently has taken action to please those voters in the terms of steel and aluminium tariffs. And now this is another sign of this protectionist approach. A third data point there is the impending departure of Gary Cohn as his chief economic advisor. Mr. Cohn, anti-tariffs, anti-protectionism, but now on his way out of the White House.
On another subject, Niall Standish, I just want to ask you about this Twitter row, of which there are many involving the US president. The latest, an long-going, I should say, Twitter row with the former Vice President Joe Biden.
Yes, indeed. Donald Trump hitting back at Joe Biden. This goes to Donald Trump's language and behaviour toward women. Joe Biden said that he would basically have beaten him up if he'd done that in school. Now Donald Trump hitting back, saying that he would win such a fight and that Joe Biden shouldn't threaten people. Just again, one other instance where it's a rather bizarre situation. You have the President of the United States and the former Vice President, both men in their 70s, talking about who would be able to beat each other up. So that's the world we're living in.
Yes, it's not very statesmanlike, is it? And they could, of course, face each other in the 2020 race, couldn't they?
They could. I mean, Joe Biden is definitely trying to keep the prospect of a 2020 run alive on his part. And it's odd, a row like this, for all its bizarreness, doesn't necessarily hurt either man politically. I think Democrats will naturally rally to Biden, as they would any member of their party who gets attacked by Trump. And for Trump's base, they like him to show what he sees, I think, as machismo or as a unwillingness to back down. So it is an incredibly strange situation, but not one that necessarily hurts either man politically.
And you touched on it a little earlier, but I just wanted to ask you the latest on Donald Trump's personnel issues.
Well, there is an interesting development here today. John Dowd, who had been the lead lawyer on his personal legal team, has resigned. That came after a different lawyer had been hired to join the team. The big picture here, Sarah, is Donald Trump apparently taking a more confrontational attitude toward the Russia probe, that probe led by Robert Mueller. Dowd had favoured a more conciliatory approach. Now, Joe DeGeneva, the new lawyer, is much more of a street fighter. So watch this space. OK,
Niall Standish, thanks very much indeed for talking to us.
President Trump today signalled the start of a trade war with China, imposing up to $60 billion worth of tariffs. He blamed China for the loss of 6 million US jobs, saying it uses unfair trade practices and is out of control. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore now on the president's proclamation.
This is number one, but this is the first of many.
With that warning, the president opened up a new front in his America First protectionist agenda. With this proclamation, the new target is China. The two countries are the economic engines of our age, now heading towards a high-stakes trade war. According to Donald Trump, China is responsible for the gutting of American manufacturing.
We've lost, over a fairly short period of time, 60,000 factories in our country, closed, shuttered, gone. 6 million jobs at least, gone. It is the largest deficit of any country in the history of our world. It's out of control.
The White House claims that deficit is over $500 billion a year and is based on Chinese price fixing, cyber espionage and intellectual property theft. The measures signed by Trump today hit China with tariffs on high technology. But the timing is awkward. Donald Trump regards China's President Xi as a friend, and he needs Beijing's help in containing North Korea's nuclear ambitions. But what this does is deliver on the president's incendiary campaign rhetoric.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world. Steel is steel. You don't have steel, you don't have a country.
2 weeks ago, the president announced tariffs on steel and aluminium. But it now appears he is exempting some key allies, including EU nations, while negotiations continue. The White House boldly claimed today that the era of economic surrender is over. But the clear danger is that trade conflicts can quickly escalate and become mutually destructive. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
I've been getting away with it all my